Is that happening? Yes. Welcome back to Senate Economic Development and Housing and General Affairs. Right now, we're going to focus on the general affairs part. We're going to turn back to labor, where the House has made a proposal of amendment to our workers' comp bill, S-173. And we have with us our legislative counsel, Sophie Zadany, who is going to take us through the proposal of amendment. Yes.
Sorry, just gotta find the right. It's hard to tell when they're all swapped on my
Yeah.
screen here, so just bear with me. So there were some pretty significant changes to the bill. So when it left the Senate, it was really focused on vocational rehabilitation.
Correct.
And it was to do with the initial screening requirement. And so this committee in the Senate had removed the initial screening requirement from the vocational rehabilitation statute. And then because there was testimony around concerns around vocational rehabilitation generally, there was a creation of a working group to look into that and make more detailed recommendations back. So on the House side, because there was a working group, I think there was a concern about removing the initial screening. If you have a working group, let the working group come back with recommendations as to whether or not to remove the initial screening. So as you'll see on the little chart I passed out on section 1, it retained just one piece that you had in there, which was adding to the Department of Labor form that's given to injured workers the right to request vocational rehabilitation services in the future if the work injury affects the worker's ability to earn the worker's pre-injury wage. So that was the only piece that landed up going into the statute. That was the only change. So it deleted the removal of the initial screening requirement. And then there was also language around a claimant having the right to initiate vocational rehabilitation services, which I believe they have already, but there was language in the statute to make that clearer. So that came out as well. And then there were some changes in section 2 to the vocational rehabilitation working group. And so one was before the bill had that the director of workers' compensation would be on the working group. And what the House did was switch that to the Commissioner of Labor or designee. So the Commissioner of Labor could designate the director of workers' compensation to be the designee, but have that be up to the commissioner. And then it adds 3 additional people. So one is a current member of the House of Representatives coming from the Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. One would be a current member of the Senate appointed by the Committee on Committees, which would be a member of this committee. And then the Commissioner of Financial Regulation or designee. So there were 3 additional members added. And then because they took out the proposed language on the initial screening, when the work of the working group, it was then to add language in about whether or not there should continue to be an initial screening. So the questions that had been asked were just broken up into 3 different buckets of questions. So the first set is on initial screening questions. And again, is the initial screening requirement relevant and helpful or a hindrance? Do us
So, sorry, what page?
Okay, sorry, we are on page 3. Middle of page 3. And this is the list of topics for the working group to consider. And again, 3 buckets. So the first one is questions around the initial screening requirement. So under subdivision A, there is the current initial screening requirement relevant and helpful or a hindrance? Do other states require an initial screening? Should the 3 questions currently asked as part of the initial screening be modified? So that's currently in the vocational rehabilitation rules. It lists the 3 questions that are asked. And there was testimonies. So Higher Ability testified, I believe a couple of times in House Commerce and Economic Development, and they're the entity that currently does the initial screening. So based on the testimony, these additional questions came up. At the bottom of page 3, what improvements could be made to ensure that those conducting the initial screening and voc rehab generally are familiar with workers' compensation
Yeah,
system.
because that was the issue.
And then who has current oversight over the initial screening process to ensure the system is working as intended. And then the next section, subdivision 2, in the middle of page 4, vocational rehabilitation generally. So this is more focused on the questions that this committee had, this and the third bucket. So again, what mechanisms could veteran earlier identify which claimants are likely to require voc rehab services? Are they adequately informed? Are some of the requirements too onerous and administratively unnecessary? Could they be provided, services be provided in a way that's more cost effective for the system? And then how could the Department of Labor's oversight be improved? And then these last 3 questions were, I believe these are the same questions that this committee had, and this was to do with wage replacement benefits. So those questions are unchanged. And then the only other change on this was, and this was a change made by House Appropriations, was the, if you remember, the reimbursement of expenses is going to be paid for by the Department of Labor for members of the working group. But now that there are 2 legislators added, House Appropriations added in this subdivision 2 at the top of page 6, just to provide that legislative members of the working group would receive per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses, again, for up to 5 meetings. And those payments would come from monies appropriated to the General Assembly. And there was testimony from JFO that there would be around $2,000, and that they felt that that could be addressed. There didn't need to be any additional monies for that.
That is de minimis, as they say.
Right. And then there's a whole new section here. Section 3 is, this came from another bill that was in House Commerce and Economic Development, and this was to do with apprenticeships. This wasn't my bill originally, but my understanding is that the changes that are being made here are to be consistent with Act 55, which passed a couple of years ago, around addressing those who've been historically marginalized and making sure the language is updated on that. And
So
then,
this was a request from the Department of Labor, from Jay, I assume.
yes. And this was also to be, I believe, to be consistent with changes in federal regulations. So Jay Ramsey did testify for the department on the apprenticeship piece. So I don't really have any, specific details on that. There's a brief summary on the back of the handout I provided
Thank you.
on what the changes were.
And these are federal and
Yeah, and it was
And-
also,
state.
yes. And then at the very end, keeping the same effective date, but then because of that apprenticeship piece, this proposes amending the title of the bill to be an act relating to vocational rehabilitation and apprenticeships, just to add the apprenticeships into the title.
Great. Terrific.
It's a question. So, page 6, the apprenticeship section. All this is current language. Correct. We're just modifying where it's either struck out or.
Exactly, yes.
So. So the question before us is,
I'm supportive of all this, and I actually like the changes they made to sections 1 through 21, so I don't have any concerns.
yeah, I have no concerns. I just, the apprenticeship stuff seems like a good update. DOL has asked for them. Jay has asked for them. They're a combination of federal and Vermont updates. So my guess is these are probably needed. It might be, if we wanted to, David, if you were able to connect with Jay today and just go over those so that we could do a quick vote before the floor tomorrow morning about whether we concur or not. But I'm happy to concur if you're okay with what Jay brings back. Can we do that? Can we delegate that?
Last name?
Jay Ramsey. I can give you his number.
Yeah, so page 10, line 7. It previously talked about strengthen relationship. They're talking about underserved populations. What are individuals who face systemic barriers?
So my understanding is that in Act 55 that was passed in 2023, one of the directives in Act 55 was for the Commissioner of Labour to work with the Vermont Office of Racial Equity to examine ways to better incorporate necessary language to promote equity and diversity in apprenticeship programs, including the expansion of underrepresented communities in apprenticeship programs. And so that was in addition to the federal regulations, that was where the state
For
changes
example,
came
individuals
from.
with a disability. That fall into that category as opposed to someone.
I would think so.
I would think so, but I don't know.
So I think that's a good question, David, when you talk to Jay, you just asked that. I think it includes anyone who faced barriers in employment.
Besides someone like these.
And we got a long list here.
Yeah,
So this really started out as vocational rehabilitation.
yeah, but as we near the end of session,
Yeah,
as you
the
know,
apprenticeship bit. We didn't have an apprenticeship
No.
section originally. How's it germane? There's a lot of stuff in here that's,
it's labor related. The House Clerk deemed it germane. I mean, it's been,
that's a question.
so, who reported this bill? I mean, one question, I mean, no, I know you reported it for us. A question for you, David, would be, well, a suggestion. I'd suggest if you were able to today, 2 people to connect with, one, Marcotte, Michael Marcotte, and the second would be Jay.
Okay, well, it's a busy day.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
So maybe like.
I appreciate it.
6
I'm happy to do that. Also, I can happy to take on the Marcotte piece if you're able to connect with Jay.
Sure.
Okay,
Conquer.
divide and conquer.
So I do have a question. This again, this is new language, this whole
Yeah,
apprenticeship thing's all new. So for example, page 7, definition of underserved communities, the very bottom of the page, line 21, live in a rural area. By federal standards, the entire state of Vermont is a rural area.
correct.
And then the next page,
That may be a federal piece, you know, that's,
the point is, it's
Yeah.
to your point, lots of people's opinions here. These very late changes, are sometimes not well fleshed out. And I'm not sure. So for example, just living in a rural area, okay, that's a big problem. It's a state.
that's all.
And then veterans, why are veterans underserved? You know, veterans, underserved community. It's a lot of this is like feel good and yeah, not quite sure it's appropriate.
I would have that conversation with Jay. I'll have it with Mike. And, that this we will probably see in other bills as well. I know we have changes in S 327. Again, it's not, these are coming over in their normal order. We just are very pressed for time. So, no, I'm not feeling like I don't want to do due diligence. That's not my point. My point is, you know, this is normal at the end of session is that things get added that the Department of Labor may have realized that these changes needed to be enacted and the feds were fresh, you know, who knows? I don't fully know, but let's find out. So, and we,
Underserved communities, read this definition.
That's right.
well, this all stems from Act 55 in 23, was it, or 20? Anyway, which asked to work with the Department of, with the Office of Racial Equity to improve some of these apprenticeship pieces. So that is work that has come from them. But we'll check with Jay. So when you talk to Jay, find out where all these pieces are. And I will check with Mark. Do you have any input, David? Having answered on the apprenticeship piece, I don't think probably.
Not on the apprenticeship.
Do you have any comments on the changes that they made to the workers' comp piece?
Sure, happy to.
Would you like to just weigh in? Because I think that would be helpful. We have 3 minutes.
Do you want me to do it from here?
Yeah, absolutely.
David Vickenberg here on behalf of Working Vermont. We like the bill as it came out of the Senate, which was to eliminate the screening, which we think is unnecessary. The pre-screening for voc rehab, I think everyone's goal is to get voc rehab, people into voc rehab as quickly as possible. And we've seen a number of examples of that not happening as a result of this pre-screening. That being said, I mean, I think the task force or the study or whatever,
The working
the
group.
working group is a good thing, and it will look broadly at a bunch of different aspects of voc rehab. So our preference would be to keep it in the Senate version, which eliminated the pre-screening, but understood that the House took a different position, and think there is benefit to having the working group work on all of these issues for next year.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Anything else, Sophie? Great. So we'll report back and we'll discuss this at the beginning, tomorrow morning if we're able, so that we can then make a decision about whether we concur, whether we go back with a further proposal of amendment. Or we'll see what we are up to. Great. Thank you all. Appreciate your work this morning. Thank you for your support on the floor. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Sarah, I sent you an email.